Hello and welcome to our Heritage Lecture. Thank you for joining us. My name is Cindy Kunis and I'm the Projects Coordinator at Delaware River Greenway Partnership. The RGP works to preserve and enhance the Delaware River's natural, cultural, and recreational resources. Education is an important part of our mission. Today's presentation explores the incredible fireflies. Allow me to introduce you to Jenna Davis, a Xerces Society Ambassador. And please add your questions to the Q&A section, and I will read them at the end for Jenna to answer. Take it away, Jenna.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and thank you everyone for being here today. What a great way to celebrate International Dark Sky Week than to be here learning about fireflies with me. My name is Jenna Davis. I'm a Xerces Society Ambassador, and that means I'm a volunteer who is involved with education and outreach activities for the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. If you don't know, the Xerces Society is a science-based nonprofit that protects nature through the conservation of invertebrates and their habitats. We were founded in 1971 by Dr. Robert Michael Pyle, and our namesake is the Xerces blue butterfly, the first butterfly known to go extinct in the US due to human activities. It's a reminder of why we do the work we do. Xerces is supported by an amazing community of members who make our work possible. For any members watching today, I want to say thank you. And if you'd like to become a member, you can do so at xerces.org/donate. We approach invertebrate conservation from multiple angles. These include scientific research, outreach and education, applied restoration and management activities, and advocating for conservation-minded policies. The areas of work at the Xerces Society include endangered species conservation, pollinators and agricultural biodiversity, pesticide reduction, and community engagement. This last focus is where I come in as an ambassador, spreading the word about insects and what we can all do to protect them. In this work, Xerces interacts and collaborates with diverse groups, including farmers, land managers, government agencies, corporations, and thousands of people who protect invertebrates in their neighborhoods, like you. The Xerces Society works hard to compile and disseminate the latest scientific research, and as part of this, we produce a large number of our own publications and other resources. This includes habitat installation guides, plant lists, monitoring protocols, species fact sheets, and more, all of which are available in the publications library on our website. You can find that at xerces.org/publications. Several of the resources that I'll talk about today are available in this library, and I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't already. Okay, so let's dive into fireflies. Xerces first started working on fireflies because we kept hearing anecdotal reports of their decline, but few people seemed to be working in the realm of firefly conservation. This was surprising given the near universal love that people seem to have for fireflies. If you have ever had a chance to watch fireflies on a warm summer night, you know how magical they can be. Fireflies have long captured the human imagination, and they are frequently the focus of art, literature, and cultural traditions. The incredible nighttime displays have spurred a growing ecotourism sector, both in the United States and abroad. Ecologically, they are important components of community food webs, both as predators and as prey. Fireflies are also charismatic, diverse, and well-loved, making them an ideal flagship species for insect conservation. Fireflies, which are also called lightning bugs and glowworms, are neither flies, bugs, or worms. In fact, they are beetles from the order Coleoptera in the family Lampyridae. Beetles are distinguished by having their first set of wings harden and thicken, like you can see here. This is known as an elytra. These hard forewings serve as a protected shield for the more fragile wings they use to fly, which stay safely folded underneath. There are at least 173 described species in the US and Canada, and more than 2,200 worldwide. As you can see from this map, where the black dots are observations, fireflies can be found in every state except Hawaii and in all but one Canadian territory. They're also found in a wide variety of habitats, from riparian woodlands to desert canyons. The one key feature of nearly all these sites is moisture. So here you can see some habitats where fireflies are known to occur. From the top left, we have Bayfield, Colorado, Peña Blanca, Arizona, Sharptown, Maryland, and Everglades City, Florida. Fireflies are, of course, known for their light. However, not all adult fireflies produce light, although most of them do. All three of the insects you see on the slide are adult fireflies, and each represents a different type of firefly. This firefly on the right is probably the one you're most familiar with, a flashing firefly or lightning bug. Some, like the California pink glowworm on the top left, have flightless adult females which emit very dim glows to attract mostly non-luminescent males that fly overhead. These males typically have enormous eyes in order to better see the females on the ground. One example of a glowworm firefly in our area is the blue ghost firefly, which is found all the way from the Florida Panhandle north through the Appalachians to Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. Rather than short flashes, males fly low to the ground, emitting a bluish-white glow for up to a minute at a time. And others, like this dark firefly on the bottom left, don't light up at all and are instead active during the day and emit chemical pheromones to attract potential mates. You can find them perched on leaves or tree bark in the middle of the day. So if someone asked me the question, what does a firefly look like? The most truthful response might actually be something like this. Fireflies go through 4 life stages: egg, larva, pupa, and adult. But they spend most of their lives in the larval phase, which can last up to 2 years in some cases. In most species, the egg, pupa, and adult phases don't last more than a few weeks. As you can see from these photos, fireflies are very diverse in appearance, but they do tend to have armored body segments, and most live in or on the soil. Down on the ground, leaf litter and vegetation provide shelter and moisture that they depend on. Adults aren't the only life stage that produces light. Firefly eggs, larvae, and pupa will also produce light as a warning signal, announcing they are toxic and bad tasting to potential predators. As I just mentioned, firefly avoid predators, but they also are predators. So the larval stage is when fireflies carry out one of their most important roles, feeding on snails, slugs, earthworms, and other soft-bodied critters. A larva will extend its head into a snail shell, inject it with a neurotoxin and digestive enzymes, and then slurp up the snail soup that follows. Fireflies' appetite for snails and slugs mean that they provide valuable pest control in our gardens, which is especially important in certain farming systems like rice paddies in parts of Asia. Typically, fireflies only eat as larvae with a few exceptions. There are predatory photourus females that will mimic the flashes of other fireflies to attract and then eat them. They do this to take and pass on the toxic compounds that other fireflies have as a way of protecting themselves and their offspring. You also sometimes find adult fireflies sipping on nectar from flowers or sap from maple trees. They aren't major pollinators like bees or moths, but they likely do move some pollen from flower to flower, making them incidental pollinators. So what is the status of these charismatic and well-loved animals? For many years, the general consensus among the public worldwide has seemed to be that fireflies are not as abundant as they once were. Declines have been documented in some places. However, here in the US, we lack the baseline data and systematic monitoring needed to paint a clear picture of population trends. By now, you've probably seen various news headlines warning of insect declines. Many different insects are of conservation concern right now, including widespread species, and ones that are restricted to specific regions or habitats. Studies from around the world are showing declines in diversity and abundance of insects pretty much across the board. Although there is still a lot we don't know, there is sufficient data to support the need to act now. This is what we are doing with fireflies, taking what we do know and working to protect them while continuing to build our knowledge base and adapt our approach as needed. So in order to establish what we do know about fireflies in the US and Canada, Xerces partnered with other organizations, including the New Mexico Biopark Society and the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN. They have a firefly specialist group, and this partnership occurred in 2019 to assess the extinction risk of the North American species. So the results of that assessment were, we found that about a third of assessed species are doing okay and are categorized as least concern. However, about 14% or 18 species are threatened with extinction and 2 species are near threatened. And over half of the species assessed were too data deficient to draw conclusions, meaning we don't even know enough about them to say if their populations are declining or not. However, if we extrapolate the data that we do have, that would mean that 1/3 of firefly species may be threatened with extinction. Here's a list of some of the IUCN threatened and vulnerable species in the US. I just wanted to highlight that several of these species are likely to be found in or near the Delaware River Basin states of Delaware, Maryland, New York, and Pennsylvania. You can see Bethany beach firefly, belted firefly, and the keelneck firefly, some of the species that might only be found in this area. I also included the pointy-lobed firefly on this list, which has not been identified in any of these states, but has quite a large range, and I'd say Ohio is close enough. So while we don't yet understand the full extent of why some species seem to be declining, we have some ideas. In 2020, the Firefly Specialist Group published a perspective piece exploring the perceived threats to fireflies across different regions of the world. Collectively, the largest threats to fireflies are habitat loss, light pollution, and pesticide use. Other threats, such as declining water quality, invasive species, and climate change-induced drought and rising sea levels, may also be taking a toll. So habitat loss and degradation is considered one of the largest threats to most declining insect species. It can take many forms, including commercial and residential development, water pollution, groundwater pumping, modification of waterways, and just plain old habitat fragmentation. This photo shows a new development that occurred in critical habitat for what was thought to be the largest known population of the Bethany Beach firefly, a critically endangered species. Flashing fireflies and glowworms need dark nights, and they're not the only ones. More than 60% of invertebrates are nocturnal, which makes them more vulnerable to light pollution. In fact, more than 3/4 of firefly species in the United States and Canada are nocturnal or crepuscular, meaning they're active at dusk. These species rely on bioluminescent courtship patterns to locate mates and do not use any other visual or chemical cues. Because of this, flashing fireflies and glowworms are very sensitive to light and use ambient darkness as a cue to time their flashing behavior. Light pollution from urbanization and infrastructure is a serious threat to these fireflies. As you can see from these photos, light pollution can be quite pervasive, from sky glow from an urban area to artificial light that can actually be seen from space. Pesticides, including insecticides and herbicides, have been implicated in the declines of many insect species and may be affecting firefly populations. Fireflies can be exposed to pesticides via direct applications to their habitat, runoff from nearby treatments, or consumption of contaminated prey. These same pesticides may also degrade their habitat or eliminate larval food sources. Climate change can affect fireflies directly, like through flooding or drought, or indirectly through effects on their predators, competitors, or prey. Because firefly development depends on climate and local weather, environmental changes will probably affect their populations in many ways, including emergence times, abundance, and species ranges. In addition to all of these threats, certain history traits might make some species more vulnerable than others. For example, species with flightless females, like this California pink glowworm, are more vulnerable to habitat destruction and ground disturbances since they cannot easily disperse from a site because they can't fly. Species that require true dark for their mating displays may be more highly impacted by light pollution. And species that already have very restricted ranges or depend on at-risk habitat types like mangroves or wetlands may feel these pressures more than species found in more widespread or common habitats. These threats may seem overwhelming, but fortunately, you can help fireflies. There are many things you can do to help them survive. First, it's important to understand what they need to thrive. In addition to protection from pesticides and other potentially negative impacts, fireflies need four primary things: moisture, food, shelter, and for most species, dark nights. Moisture ensures that the fireflies and their prey do not desiccate and dry up. Food is especially critical at the larval stage. Shelter in the form of leaf litter, underground burrows, rocks, rotting logs, and vegetation is needed at all life stages. And dark nights are important to species that are night active and use those bioluminescent courtship signals. So here are some simple acts that you can use to make a difference. The key actions include protecting fireflies from ground disturbing activities, being conscientious about pesticide use, providing habitat features that are important for fireflies, and reducing light pollution. Contributing to community science programs is also a great way to help researchers learn more about firefly populations. Educating others and advocating for fireflies in your community can ensure that their needs are considered by your friends, neighbors, and local policymakers. So I'm going to go into a little more depth on these simple acts. First, leave the leaves. Leaf litter provides important shelter not only for fireflies, but also a number of other species like bees, butterflies, and snails. Leaves are also natural fertilizers. Leaving leaf litter and mulch supports many other insects that overwinter in that leaf litter or hunt for prey there. It also improves the moisture content of the soil, which, as we've discussed, is important to fireflies and their prey. Some ways you can incorporate this is by refraining from leaf blowing or raking and using fallen leaves in place of wood chips for mulch. Mowing less often may also benefit fireflies. Mower blades and ground trampling associated with mowing can directly kill fireflies since both larvae and egg-laying females spend most of their time on the ground. Males may also be found using grasses and forbs as resting places during the day. If you do need to mow, consider setting your mower blades higher to provide a buffer. As a bonus, your grass will grow back a little slower when you do this versus cutting it as short as you can. Or you can mow when fireflies are least active, usually in the fall or winter, but some places may be extending into the spring. Fireflies may not be feeding directly on plants, but diverse native plants are still key to firefly habitat. Grasses and flowering forbs can provide shelter and perching places and may also provide food sources for fireflies and other wildlife. Shrubs and trees are important too. Both can provide additional shelter and perches, and trees can help block light pollution. So if you know there's a known source of light pollution nearby, a row of fast-growing trees can help block that. Beyond light barriers, different species of fireflies signal from different heights, so having a range of perching heights will help cater to all of them. Several species also use tree bark to pupate or overwinter. Some species will even use the same overwintering trees every year. So that just goes to highlight again how all types of vegetation, trees, shrubs, grass, they're all important. All this vegetation additionally helps retain soil moisture and enhance the diversity of other insect species, which in turn helps reduce pest outbreaks and provide more diverse food for both fireflies and other wildlife like birds. Fireflies, like many other wildlife species, prefer areas that stay a little messy. Consider leaving down logs and rocks and leaf litter for shelter, signaling perches, and hunting. Allow some areas of your yard to stay a bit unkempt. Create a shade garden to increase moisture availability for fireflies and their prey. Whenever possible, pesticide use should be avoided except for situations of economic damage or public health risk. Consider non-chemical alternatives and eliminate all cosmetic use. If pesticides must be used, work to minimize their impacts to fireflies and their habitat. This can be done by spot treating weeds instead of blanket treatments or using an early detection system before weeds get out of hand. Remember that pesticides have the potential to harm not only fireflies and their habitat, but also the soft-bodied prey that they rely on. Fireflies need dark nights, and eliminating artificial light at night is the best thing you can do to help them. However, if light is needed for practical or safety reasons, consider reducing its impact by installing motion detectors rather than keeping lights on all the time. Also, you can shield or lower your lights so that they have a more targeted effect, or keep curtains closed at night to limit the amount of light that spills out. You can also swap your bright bulbs for dim red or amber bulbs, or use a simple red light filter on existing bulbs. So just to go into that a little bit more, these are the 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting from DarkSky International. Responsible outdoor lighting is useful, targeted, low level, controlled, and warm colored. Only use light if and when it's needed. Direct that light so it falls only where it is needed, meaning it's pointed down and shielded from the top and sides. Light should be no brighter than necessary, and use warmer colored bulbs to limit the amount of blue or violet light. And here's an example for some of those first points. Light that's shining upward or horizontally is not shielded. We would want lights that are on at night to be pointed down and blocked from the top and sides. And ideally, you want to have that light on a timer or motion sensor so that the light is only shining when it's needed and not just on all night. Having gone through this process recently myself, I thought I would also take a moment to talk about light bulb terminology. So on a light bulb label, you'll see 3 important numbers. That'll be the wattage in watts, the brightness in lumens, and the color temperature in Kelvin. An average incandescent or filament bulb that you might find at home was about 60 watts, just 800 lumens, and only about 2700 Kelvin color temperature. This is sometimes called soft white nowadays. The old sodium vapor streetlights were only 2200 Kelvin, and that gave off that orangey amber glow that you still see some places. However, most LEDs on the market today are not warm whites, but cool whites with a much higher color temperature, and many of them are also excessively bright with very high lumens. A good rule of thumb, no outdoor light should ever be more than 1800 lumens or 3000 Kelvin. And the lower those numbers are, the better. You want it to be as dim as possible and as warm as possible. One more little example for us. Here we see a pretty common setup that you'd find in residential areas. There's multiple bright lights, including a floodlight. It's not shielded and they're shining horizontally. Your neighbor might say, "These are security lights. I keep them on for safety. I need to see my garage or my driveway." But rather than making you more safe, the glare from these floodlights actually increases shadows and doesn't allow the human eye to adjust to see what's there. If the light was instead pointed down towards the driveway and shielded from the sides, the driveway and the garage door would still be illuminated, but your eyes can more easily adjust to the dark. And just to see that one more time with the arrow, like there's a person standing right there off the garage that you can't even tell until you block the light. Now, this effect was done with a phone camera, but a very, very similar thing happens in your actual eye. So ultimately, see what you can do to leave some places a little wild, dark, and pesticide free. Your best plan of action for creating or enhancing firefly habitat is to embrace a diversity of microhabitats. This hypothetical scene of fireflies at dusk depicts some of the elements that fireflies need: a diversity of plants and canopy heights, leaf litter and underground burrows for shelter, and tall grasses for perching and trees with deeply furrowed bark for overwintering, as well as dark skies free of light pollution and a water source in the distance. Another great way to contribute to firefly conservation is to participate in community science. There's still a lot we don't know about where firefly species occur, what times of year they are active, how abundant they are, or what factors may be impacting their populations. This is where you can come in and really contribute to our understanding of firefly populations. One way that you can do this is through the Xerces new Firefly Atlas, a collaborative effort to collect more data on species distributions, phenologies, habitat, and threats, particularly for those species categorized as threatened and data deficient. So anyone in the US and Canada can contribute data to the Atlas by reporting an observation or conducting a full survey. There are 3 focal regions of the US that we are especially interested in, including the Mid-Atlantic, where we are now. These regions have high concentrations of data deficient and threatened firefly species and are home to the project's 13 focal species, which you see pictured on the left. That said, there are data deficient firefly species all across North America, so any contributions would be valuable no matter where you live. The Firefly Atlas website also serves as a resource center with information on fireflies in general, as well as their conservation needs, species profiles, and tips for photography and identification. One especially nice feature is a downloadable species checklist for the USA and Canada that can be filtered by species, genus, state or province, or conservation status. This can help for narrowing down which species might be in your area or an area that you are visiting. The project provides data sheets and a participant handbook so folks can learn more about our target species and how to get involved. I know this data sheet looks a little daunting, but I promise the handbook covers everything you need to know from firefly anatomy to flash patterns. Also, don't forget, a picture is worth 1,000 words. The more and better your photos are, the easier it is for scientists to identify the species. Speaking of flash patterns, they can also be a little intimidating, but like I said, the handbook goes over everything. They've provided this graphic to help familiarize you with the terminology for flash patterns. I want to note that you don't have to include all of this data in your submissions to the Atlas, but the flash pattern is a distinguishing feature for many species, so without it, scientists might not be able to fully confirm an ID. So here's those IUCN red list species again, and I'm just going to go into a little more detail about 3 of those species, which are also on the Xerces focal list. That would be the Bethany Beach firefly, the keel-necked firefly, and the mysterious lantern firefly. Here's the Bethany Beach firefly. It's named for the coastal town in Delaware where it was discovered in 1949. It can be distinguished from similar species by its small size, less than an inch long, and a distinguishing black marking on its protonum or head shield, which is described as tree or mushroom shaped. They also have a distinctive green double flash pattern, which is illustrated at the bottom. These fireflies depend on freshwater marshes near coastal dunes called swales. Freshwater swales are relatively rare, but they provide shelter, a source of food, and moisture, which the species needs in all its life stages. The mysterious lantern firefly is also very small in size, similar to the Bethany Beach firefly, and its range is restricted to tidal freshwater floodplains of the Delmarva Peninsula. But unlike the Bethany Beach firefly, which depends on those freshwater marsh swales, this mysterious lantern is found in forested peatlands, most often where Atlantic white cedar is a dominant species. You can see here their flash pattern varies based on the ambient temperature, with it being faster in warm weather and slowing down to half speed in cooler weather. Although the female response is not listed or not known, both the males and females of the species are believed to flash. The keelneck firefly is a larger firefly, maybe more like what you're used to seeing in size. That protonum or head shield is very unique, with a raised line across it, the keel, and a mostly red and black pattern. That shield kind of bends down over their eyes, which you can see in the bottom photo, but of course the firefly can stick its head out around it as well. This one has bright yellow flashes that are long, lasting a full second, and are repeated at 8-second intervals. There are a few other Firefly community science programs out there besides the Firefly Atlas. The Western Firefly Project is gathering reports of flashing fireflies in their area. This program started in Utah through the Natural History Museum, but is now expanding to include all Western states. In addition, iNaturalist is a very popular place for sharing firefly observations, although the lack of flash pattern details can make species IDs difficult. Again, the more and better your photos are, the easier it will be for experienced users to make a positive identification. There might also be other projects depending on your location. I know there's one specific to the Carolina ghost hunt, and you just have to check your area, your state, and see if there's anything around. As you learn more about fireflies and what they need, I hope you will begin to advocate for them in your community and educate others. This can take many forms, from encouraging the creation or protection of firefly-friendly habitats to working with your municipality to pass pesticide and lighting policies that are friendly to fireflies. You can even join or start a local chapter of DarkSky International. At the very least, we hope you will share this information with friends, families, and neighbors. And if you want to find out about DarkSky International, you can look into them at darksky.org. And if you want to learn more about fireflies, there are several wonderful books and guides available. Lynn Foss' book on the left there provides an in-depth overview of fireflies in the eastern and central US. Sarah Lewis's book, Silent Sparks, introduces readers to the science and wonder of fireflies and includes a brief guide to commonly encountered genera in North America. And for the West, Larry Bushman has drafted a digital field guide focused on species in Kansas, Colorado, and Arizona, but also extending into other states. Xerces has worked with our Firefly partners to develop a number of other resources related to fireflies, all of which are available in the Xerces Publications Library, as well as on the Firefly Atlas website. This includes a State of the Fireflies report, which summarizes the IUCN Red List findings, as well as fact sheets, conservation guidelines, and species profiles. You can also find Firefly-related webinars and presentations on the Xerces Society YouTube channel and at the Bug Banter podcast. Or feel free to follow the Xerces Society on your preferred social media for seasonal news and updates. Thank you. If you'd like more info, please check out the Xerces Society's resources and the Firefly Atlas website. You may also reach out to me directly using the contact info on the right, and I will do my best to answer your questions or forward you to someone who can. I guess I can now take questions. Thank you.
Wonderful, Jenna. Thank you so much. I just want to remind everyone that our next Heritage Lecture is on the Morris Canal on May 21st. It's on our calendar, and I also posted it on our chat. So you do have a few questions in our question and answer section. Should lawn monocultures be abolished?
Ooh, good question. Um, Abolish is a strong word, but definitely I think we should minimize on our plain old lawn space and emphasize native plants. You can even get native grass seed mixes for areas that you might need to keep things a little more lawn-like, but still provide more habitat than the average, monoculture lawn that isn't even a native grass.
Little things can help.
Yeah, every little bit helps. There's no habitat too small for an insect.
Absolutely. Do you have a favorite kind of lightning bug?
Ooh, I like that question. I think my favorite kind right now is the little gray firefly, which I caught one I think at my mom's house a couple years ago. And since then I've found them in other places, but it's just really exciting. I never noticed that there were different fireflies, right? And then as soon as I found out, I started seeing them everywhere. And that was like the first one that I caught. And I was like, wow, that really is something different.
Yeah, I honestly never thought about there being different types. I also didn't realize it was a beetle. Makes sense now that you mention it. A
Misleading name a little bit.
little bit. So this person said they used to live in Merlin. Oh, sorry. They use the Merlin Bird ID app. Is there an insect equivalent?
I love the Merlin Bird app, first of all. And I really wish it also had a setting for like frog calls because sometimes when it doesn't find a bird, I think that's what it is a frog. I don't think there's something like that for insects, but I do really like iNaturalist for IDing plants, insects, just anything. The hard part is getting a clear picture of the thing you're trying to ID, especially for fireflies. You pretty much have to capture it to get photos 360 degrees to get all those identifying features.
Absolutely. And I know what you mean about the frog versus bird calls because I'm hearing stuff around my home now. And I'm not sure where there's a creek or a pond, but there's got to be because I don't think it's a bird.
Even squirrels sometimes can sound a little bit birdy.
Exactly. So this person said, my understanding is that there are some species with flightless females. How can these spread to new areas?
Ah, yes. So if they have a flightless female, their ability to spread to a new area is very, very limited because they can't travel far. They might not be able to cross a road or a waterway. So they don't spread to new areas. It's more like they had an initial range that is slowly shrinking. That's why we need to protect the habitat that we still have as much as possible.
This person sees fireflies around fields and edges, but do they go into closed canopy forests?
As far as I know, they do, but it might just change the type of firefly that you're seeing. Some of them you'll only find in like wetland areas, and there's others that are less picky. You'll find in the forest, you'll find in the field, you'll find like in your backyard.
And are there certain trees that fireflies prefer in New Jersey?
Cool. I don't know. I don't know of specific trees that are preferred, but there's some that need deep furrowed bark. So that might include like oak trees and walnut trees have some pretty deep, thick bark that has nooks and crannies for them to hide in or overwinter in. Um, and like they said, you need to have trees with a variety of heights. So, like overstory trees, understory trees, shrubs, grasses. I'd also say if you're trying to like plant a barrier of trees to block a source of light, you want to pick something that's native but also like thick and fast growing. So arborvitaes are a native species that grows pretty quick and are everywhere. Also things like cedars or spruces, pines that have kind of like a thick growth that can block light. I'd say those are probably the most helpful.
What would you recommend as the first or most important step to help conservation efforts?
Ooh, most important. They're all important. I'd say just leaving things wild because that can mean whatever it is in your case. You know, maybe you have to have lawn, but you have a garden where you can rake all your leaves to keep them over the winter. That makes a big difference. Or even just like a wet part of your yard that you can leave not mowed can go a long way.
It's a great answer. That's actually something I'm kind of dealing with now. Have some leaves. My husband wanted to blow them, and I was like, no, you can't do that. So they're blocking grass coming up. So I kind of put them in a little area before I figure out what to do next.
Yeah, that can help. If you have like a back corner of your yard where you can rake leaves and keep sticks and things like that, that's always good habitat.
Absolutely. Do they hybridize in overlapping areas?
That is a good question, and I don't know of any examples of hybridized fireflies. But of course, there's so much we don't know. You could be the first person to find one, and then you can maybe get it named after you.
Let's all start looking. Are there pamphlets this person can order to pass out to their neighbors? They have a lot of outdoor lighting.
Yes, you can get pamphlets. They're available digitally from Xerces Society, or if it's lighting you're looking for, DarkSky International, darksky.org. They have handouts. But if you want them like pre-printed, I think you have to reach out to the organization to request them. But they'll send a stack of them to your house if you ask the right person.
Putting a couple links in the chat real quick for Dark Skies and Xerces.org.
Wonderful, thank you.
And I am not seeing any more questions. So I'll give people a second um, to see if they want to post any questions. We have a few thank yous and an awesome. So extremely informative. So getting some very positive comments. And I just want to say thank you everybody for attending, asking questions, commenting, always appreciated. And I'm not seeing anything new. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Jenna. Have a
Thank you, everybody.
take care.